The Big Law Business Report is proudly sponsored by PVI Furniture and Big Law Business Development.
Where big law meets big business, this is the Big Law Business Report. I'm your host, Brian Brown. Today in the studio, we have the law firm of Ogletree Deakins. Let's get started. Welcome to the Big Law Business Report, where big law meets big business. I'm your host, Brian Brown. Joining me in the studio today is Homer Deakins, founding member of Ogletree Deakins Law Firm. Homer, thank you so much for joining me in the studio today.
My pleasure, Brian.
All right, so let's get right to it. So, Homer, what made you decide to start your law firm? What's it been, 40 years now?
This is our 40th anniversary.
Outstanding.
And we left another firm basically because of culture issues.
Okay.
It was an organization which was more top-down management.
Right.
And we said we'd like to have a firm where we listen to everybody before we decide what to do, to follow more of a team approach.
Got you. So when you talk about this team approach, I mean, a lot of law firms talk about having partners. You have shareholders.
We have shareholders today. We
Right.
started as a partnership, but as we grew and expanded office-wise, it became from a tax purpose necessary to incorporate. So we now have shareholders.
Got you. So when you first got started, Homer, what were some of the initial challenges that you faced?
Well, the challenge we faced in the early days was from the general practice firms, the large general practice firms.
Right.
Most large corporations wanted only to deal with one firm.
Sure.
And so they gave all their work, including their labor and employment work, to the general practice firms.
Gotcha.
Over time, that changed, and the labor specialty firms, as we are, began to get more of the work.
Gotcha.
Our rates were better, our geography was better in the sense we had more offices spread out across the country. So the general practice firms over the years had become less of a competitor for us.
Got you. So you found yourself specializing more so obviously just doing employment and labor issues. You were able to then go back to those CEOs, those in-house counsels, and say, hey, this is the Ogletree Deakins value proposition, so to speak, because we're much more specialized, we're much more focused.
Yes, we have always been a specialty firm.
Right.
We have only done labor and employment work, but we're a full service labor and employment firm. We would not only handle an EEO case
Sure.
or a union relations issue, we would handle a benefits question, an occupational safety question, an immigration question. So we're a full service firm versus a general practice firm that doesn't have that sort of depth.
Got you. So, Homer, what are some of the challenges that you see, facing your firm? Because you are employment specialist, what are some of the challenges that you see, and where do you see the direction of firms like yours going?
Well, the biggest challenge we have today is a shrinking market.
How so?
Well, there's just not as much work out there as there used to be. So
Gotcha.
The result is, if you're going to prosper and be successful, you've got to get a bigger share of the market.
Gotcha. So, Homer, we need to take a break. After the break, let's continue on that thought because I want to learn a little bit more about what your thoughts are there.
Sure.
All right, very good. We'll be right back.
What does your office furniture say about you and your company? Is it making the right impression for your company and your employees? At PVI Office Furniture, we have office furniture for every budget. We'll make sure your office space is sending the right message.
Fast, excellent, affordable. Business grows with PVI. Visit our showroom in Frederick, Maryland, or online at pvipvi.com.
Welcome back to the Big Law Business Report, where big law meets big business. I'm your host, Brian Brown. Joining me in the studio today to continue our conversation is Homer Deakins, Chairman Emeritus, named shareholder of Ogletree Deakins Law Firm, and Matt Keene, who is the managing shareholder of Ogletree Deakins. Gentlemen, thanks again for continuing our conversation. So, Mr. Deakins, when you and I talked one-on-one, you talked about 2 + 2 = 6. So, I did okay in math. You're going to have to help me understand that one.
Well, what I'm saying is that if we hire a lawyer who has a practice and that lawyer comes into our firm with its footprint, that lawyer is going to increase his or her practice, and we're going to increase our practice by having that lawyer's clients do work in our other offices.
Gotcha.
So simple mathematics is 2 + 2 = 6.
All right, simple mathematics, Ogletree math, huh? That's some good math, though. Well, as we know, you've been able to grow and expand over the last 40 years without having some innovative math going along the way. It does make a lot of sense. So, Matt, I'm going to touch on the 2 + 2 = 6 just here for another second or two. So again, as the managing shareholder, basically the CEO of the firm, how are you taking Homer's 2 + 2 = 6 and expanding and growing on that model?
Well, we track very closely the amount of work that is generated in one office and worked in another office, because it really wouldn't make any sense to open 52 separate offices doing 52 sets of local work. The model is that we'll share work between the offices, and I think that's one of the areas that's been critical to our success, is just the whole culture of sharing, of collaborating, of working with your fellow shareholders and associates in other offices. And so we encourage that, we facilitate it, and we track it. And as we're recruiting lawyers, we find lawyers who have the kind of national relationships that they'll be able to send work to other offices. And we have the conversation, much like Homer just had, and show them example upon example where lawyers have come with a certain amount of client work in a certain geographic area, and how they're able to get that work throughout the system, and they do better and we do better.
Got you. So, Matt, I'm going to dovetail on to that question. A lot of law firms talk about, well, it's important that we understand our client's business, right? And we're going to come by your offices and we're going to wander around for several hours. I'm not quite sure what they do while they're there, and I guess they're probably billing their clients at the time. But what is your approach? What's the Ogletree Deakins approach to understanding client business? Do you see it through their eyes? Do you ask them questions? Do you maybe shift not so much from lawyer into consultant role, or kind of how you take the approach, and what's the culture?
Well, we have a client service pledge that all of our lawyers sign, and the first item is that we pledge to clients we will understand your business and objectives. And the main way we do that is through developing these long-term relationships with clients, as well as very deep relationships where we're in many cases handling all of a client's labor and employment needs throughout the U.S. and sometimes globally.
Sure.
And just through that volume of work, we get to understand their business. We usually will have a client team across our different disciplines who will work with that client, develop a lot of institutional knowledge, and then we figure out ways to share that knowledge, either through knowledge management. We use that client extranets, client teams, to make sure that we're doing everything we can to capture, because what clients don't want to have happen is for us to handle one case in California, have a second case in New York, and the lawyer in New York acts like they've never learned anything from that experience elsewhere. So we do that, and we talk to our clients frequently. We have a pretty robust program of client assessments where our client services department and then Homer and some of our other former managing shareholders will go out, meet with clients, learn how we're doing, how we can improve. We have an innovation summit every year where we get ideas from clients. What do you need to help you do your job better?
Wow.
So I think it's the constant communication is where we learn the client's business.
Well, that's impressive. Gentlemen, Matt, Homer, hold those thoughts for a second. We need to take a quick commercial break. We'll be right back. We'll be right back on the Big Law Business Report.
A&A is your doorway to the world, to new experiences and untapped opportunities, to destinations like Tokyo and the rest of Asia. Our renowned Japanese hospitality makes even the furthest journey as effortless as a single step. And it's all by design.
Welcome back to the Big Law Business Report, where Big Law meets Big Business. We're continuing our conversation with the lawyers from Ogletree Deakins, Matt Keene, who is the managing shareholder, and the Director of Professional Development and Inclusion, Michelle Wimes. Thank you so much for joining me. Let's continue the conversation.
Sure.
So, Matt, I'm going to start with you. A lot of firms talk about diversity and inclusion and how important that is. And in some instances, I mean, we all believe them, obviously diversity is important. But in this particular scenario at Ogletree, where do you see this as a unique value proposition? Where do you see this as a differentiator for your firm?
Well, first of all, Brian, we want to provide exceptional client service to our clients.
Sure.
And to do that, we need the best talent. And having the most diverse group of lawyers and staff that we can find allows us to have the best talent in the field. Secondly, our clients have diverse workforce. We represent companies that have worldwide, global workforces
Sure.
that are very diverse. Diversity is important to them, so it's important to us. And I guess third, by having a diverse workforce, diverse lawyers bring different perspectives that we would not have if we did not have a diverse workforce, allows us to be more creative, and allows us to provide better solutions to our clients.
So, Michelle, in your role as Director of Professional Development and Diversity and Inclusion, where do you see the importance of diversity and what Ogletree is doing, and particularly with your client base?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's very important. We want to mirror, kind of like what Matt said, the values. Right. We want to live the values that our clients express, and our clients are increasingly doing business in global marketplaces, and so they are marketing to global
Sure.
customers, and they want their service providers to be able to be as diverse as well. And kind of the return on investment that I see is we've been acknowledged or rewarded by many
Sure.
of our clients for our diversity efforts. And then we've also received some national awards too. And so I think things like being recognized by Law 360 as
Yep.
the #1 firm for Black attorneys, being recognized by Working Mother Media and Flex Time Lawyers as one of the top 50 firms for diversity for working mother attorneys. And then, also something as, for the first time, we received a perfect score of 100
Wow.
on the Human Rights Campaign Corporate
That's
Equality
impressive.
Index. Yeah,
That's impressive.
Yeah, and that measures LGBT
As
inclusiveness, right, our policies and our practices. So I think, we are gaining recognition in the area, and that's part of the ROI.
Sure.
I also think it's really important, too, to make sure that you have diverse attorneys who are engaged in the firm, who
Right.
are actively involved, and who are supported to be successful, and who are moving up through the ranks. And I know you're going to talk to David Powell, who's one
Sure,
of our board
absolutely.
members, and Melissa Bailey, who's another
Absolutely.
board member. We have at this point 33% of our board is diverse.
That's
and
impressive.
That's huge.
There's not 300 law firms that have combined to have 33%. Yeah, I said it. It's
Right.
my show, right? That's one of the
Right.
great advantages of having me being the host of the show. So, Matt, coming back to you. So, this investment in diversity, how do you measure the ROI? I mean, or is it just we feel good about it because Michelle's here and we got David Powell and we've got Sarah Hawk? I mean, how do you measure how do you look at that investment?
Well, I think we see very tangible results. I mean, particularly by combining the professional development with the diversity inclusion initiatives. We're getting better training, we're getting better engagement by our lawyers. Michelle mentioned the many awards and accolades
Sure.
we've received, both from clients as well as respected organizations.
Right.
And so, that certainly, you get scored on those. And,
Absolutely.
100% is better than 50% is better than 25%.
Absolutely.
So we've seen the increases that we've gained. And then lastly, there's an ABA initiative where clients are asking to see the lawyer to actually work on their files. They're not, it's not enough to show that we're a diverse firm, that we've got diverse leadership. Clients are asking, okay, on our matters, let's see the diversity on our matters.
Right.
And we stack up pretty well
And
in
I
the
would
surveys
think,
we've done.
Yeah, and I would think not only are they looking for the people who work on the matters, but can those people actually work on the matters,
That's right.
Some folks get away by diversity. Say, well, we'll bring Brian Brandon because he's an African American man, barely older than 40, and so we'll bring him in. Forget the fact that I don't have a law degree. This is immaterial. Maybe you can come there and try to be quiet, which is going to be impossible as well. But you're actually bringing your diverse, from what I'm understanding, again, knowing Michelle over the years and knowing the firm, you're actually bringing diverse lawyers that can bring something to the table.
That's right.
Beside, I meet a diversity checkbox. Well, folks, we're a bit out of time. We're going to go for a break. Don't move. We'll be right back, and let's continue this conversation. We'll be back in a moment.
You know, when I first started out, it was all pencil and paper. The Surface Pro is very intuitive. With the pressure of my hand, I can draw lightly, just like I would with a real pencil. I've been a forensic artist for over 30 years. I do the composite sketches, which are the bad guy sketches. You need good resolution, powerful processor, because the computer has to start thinking as fast as my brain does. I do this because I want my artwork to help people.
Welcome back to the Big Law Business Report. In the studio today, I've got Keith Watts, managing shareholder of the law firm of Ogletree Deakins. Keith, thank you so much for joining me today.
Brian, it's a pleasure to be here.
All right. So let's get right to it. So, Keith, you started your office with how many attorneys?
2 in February of 2010.
Okay, and you have how many now?
36.
36, are you sure?
As of December, yes.
As
36.
of December, 36 attorneys.
36.
So, I would imagine being in Irvine, California, not only do you have a very diverse set of attorneys working with you, but you probably have a very diverse set of clients. So what are some of the challenges that you face working with a diverse set of clients? How do you approach CEOs of companies when you're talking to them about working with you and your team at Ogletree?
Well, Brian, I think the most important thing, if I was talking to the CEO or whoever the client contact is make them feel at home. Our house is your house.
Okay.
And, our place of business is your place of business. And sort of when in Rome, do as the Romans do, right?
Right,
if
sure.
Especially if they're from a place that hasn't done a lot of business in the United States, California is, as I like to call it, particularly particular.
Right.
There's some nuances you would want to be aware of. But I think it's just saying, look, I think California is now the 7th largest economy in the world.
Yes, yeah.
Everybody wants to be there, but there are some rules or there's some nuances they may not be aware of. And it's really to help them stay out of trouble. My practice is all advice and counsel for the most part. And so that's what I do. I'm on the phone just, with the CEO or whomever it happens to be, helping them understand and sort of giving them here's the risk spectrum. If you do things this way,
right.
It's going to be a little bit riskier, a little less riskier this way. But, they don't really want to know so much about, that particular case or this particular case. They want to know how do I do the right thing? How do I keep my business open? How do I be compliant? And they also don't want, they don't want the law to be a distraction to them. They just want to come and do business. And,
right.
and that's our goal, is to make life as easy for them as possible and make them look good too.
Well, that's true. But if you want to make me look good, that's probably going to require a lot of plastic surgery and obviously a lot of medication. So, so when you talk about make them look good, what do you mean by that? I hear attorneys use that term quite a bit. How do you make a CEO of a corporation or general counsel look good?
It's providing them with solutions. There was a general counsel who I'll never forget. He said this in a seminar. He said, there's 2 types of associates that come into your office. There's the ones that say, "Boss, we got a problem," and he says, "There's the ones who come in and say, 'Boss, we got a problem, but I have a solution to fix it.'" We have to be that second class of people. When the person comes to us with a problem, we have to give them a variety of solutions. And they already know they've got the problem, right?
Sure.
So it's our job to say, okay, here you are in America, you want to do business. Here are the things that you kind of have to you have to be aware of, you have to be mindful of. That it may be very different from the culture that you have. And a lot of folks, they'll shortchange themselves by not giving the client the opportunity to sort of develop that awareness, because just telling them something is different from them experiencing it, and
Right.
we want to keep them out of the pitfalls. That, others have already made those mistakes. We don't want you to do the same thing.
Well, Keith, I appreciate you so much for joining me on the show today and to have a very engaging conversation. You have no choice. I'm not asking you. I'm telling you, we're going to have you back on the show. Again,
Thank you.
Keith, thank you so much.
Thanks, Brent. It's my pleasure.
All right. We'll be right back on the Big Law Business Report. See you after the break. Welcome back to the Big Law Business Report, where big law meets big business. I'm your host, Brian Brown. We're continuing our conversation in the studio today with Betsy Johnson, obviously managing shareholder for the premier employment law firm in Los Angeles, Ogletree Deakins, and also Tom McInerney, also with the premier employment law firm in San Francisco area, Ogletree Deakins. Thank you so much for joining me, and thank you so much for continuing the conversation. So, for someone that lives on the East Coast, the perception in California is everything goes, and I know, Betsy, we had talked about this before, so let's talk a little bit deeper. Let's go into a little bit deeper detail. I'm looking to do business in California. I'm overseas. So either Los Angeles, we'll ask you first, obviously ladies first. Why should I establish shop in Los Angeles? What should I be thinking about? What are some of the more detailed? Obviously, we're going to have a good employee handbook, and we're going to try to make the right decisions. Maybe we'll do some drug testing. But what are the things I should be thinking about, Betsy? And when should I? And if I'm your client, what should you be talking to me about?
Well, I think first and foremost, if you're looking to relocate to Southern California, Los Angeles is a great place because we have such a breadth of talent. The talent pool that we have in the LA area spans the broad spectrum of all kinds of industries. So it's a great place to start a business. But it also, Los Angeles has its own pitfalls. We have our own municipal ordinances on paid sick leave and minimum wage and things like that. So coming in, it's important that you understand what the landscape looks like and make sure that you are setting your processes and systems up from the get-go so that you can comply with the law, especially on the wage and hour side. You've heard a lot of our lawyers talk about that. Even a small, minor technical violation can lead to large penalties and millions of dollars if it's not handled properly.
Got you. So Tom, coming to Northern California, weather doesn't matter really what the industry is. I mean, is it going to be vastly different than where Betsy is and what she's doing, or is it going to be the same, or sort of a hybrid or a mixture thereof?
I think there's some variance in that, like Los Angeles and Southern California, there's a very highly educated workforce in the Bay Area, which, like I said, is very similar to that. We also, though, have a very high housing cost. So as a result, it's very difficult to get high quality employees that can afford to live in San Francisco. Otherwise, they have to commute long distances. That can result in kind of essentially sticker shock when it comes to wages. So the salaries may be somewhat higher than Los Angeles, although they're not that they're low down in Southern California either, but it's probably some of the highest wages in the country. As a result, it really puts a premium, as Betsy said, on making sure that your pay practices are right, and you also have to maybe adjust your recruiting practices as well in order to draw that workforce. We also have issues with, as I mentioned, employees coming from long distances to work, and so it may also lead to the importance of putting on some incentives in pay practices or in pay incentives to draw those workers, like reimbursement for commute expense and things like that.
Got you. So obviously there's always a lot of talking around millennials. I mean, I know employment laws, the employment laws. Do you see, Betsy, challenges with, for your clients with dealing with millennials who may be like, well, I'm just not happy here?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, the folks that are in their 20s today, just because of modern medicine, are going to have a much longer work life than any of us will have.
Hey.
They'll be, they're going to live to over 100, chances are.
Probably.
So, for the folks who are in that age group, the millennial age group, they're looking to try a lot of different things before they settle into what their niche is. My son is right in that sweet spot there.
You live in this every day.
So I live it every day. So it does pose its own challenges, but I think an employer who puts a premium on inclusion and diversity, as we've talked a lot about, will be able to bridge those generational gaps and make it work for everyone in the workplace.
We have to go to a quick commercial break, but when we come back, I want to talk to you a little bit about, immigration issues, business immigration issues as far as employment is concerned. So, all right, hang tight, don't go anywhere. All right, we'll be right back.
Land Rover, above and beyond.
Thank you for joining me today on the Big Law Business Report. I'm your host, Brian Brown. I want to take the time to thank the lawyers of the law firm of Ogletree Deakins for joining us today. Everybody have a great week. God bless you. God bless your family. And I'll see you soon on the Big Law Business Report.
What does your office furniture say about you and your company? Is it making the right impression for your company and your employees? At PVI Office Furniture, we have office furniture for every budget. We'll make sure your office space is sending the right message.
Fast, excellent, affordable. Business grows with PVI. Visit our showroom in Frederick, Maryland, or online at pvipvi.com.